Imagine this. An employee joins company, you create account and instantly they can access email, Teams, Azure and even third-party application. But what if someone else tries to log in or a user tries to log in from another country? How do you control that? Who can access your account from where and what actions a person can do on your account? That's exactly what Microsoft Entra ID does. So, hi everyone, welcome back to Cloud with Aarya. When I first started learning Azure, identity was very confusing. We had many components around it: Azure AD, Entra ID, roles, MFA, right? But once I understood the service, everything in Azure started making sense because every user, groups, applications are all managed in Entra ID, and it's very important to understand how it functions, works, and helps you to manage everything, right? So in this video, I'll explain Entra ID in the simplest way, and we'll also do a quick hands-on demo. So what is Entra ID? So Microsoft Entra ID is a cloud-based identity and access management service. In simple words, it answers for questions: who are you, what can you access, from where, and under what conditions. Whenever you log in into Azure, Microsoft 365 Teams, and any cloud app, Entra ID verifies your identity and gives access. So whenever we are working with identity and access management, that is Entra ID in this case, there's very two important words to help you understand how it functions. That is authentication and authorization. Authentication portion defines basically who are you. You can use combination of a username and password to log in into account, in this case Azure. You can also have an additional set of security like a MFA, multi-factor authentication, and that is the authentication part: who are you, meaning you have the username and password plus MFA. And next is authorization, which is a second important component to understand this identity and access management solutions. And authorization is once you have accessed Azure, basically what functions you can perform on that account. That is, if you just have a reader access or a contributor, you can make changes, modify, right, in that sense. So authentication and authorization are basic building blocks to understand Entra ID, and you can think Entra ID as the security gate of your cloud environment. So now let's go to the illustration to understand where is Entra ID placed in entire Azure structure, right? So now to begin with, in a simple words, you can think of Entra ID as a central storehouse for identities. Identities can be your users, the group applications, right? You create users here, and from this one place, you control what they can access, whether it's Azure, Microsoft 365, or any other application. And instead of managing access in multiple places, everything is controlled from one central location, that is Entra ID. So in this illustration, whenever we sign up to Azure, we get Azure account. We can log in into Azure Portal. One other piece, whenever we create Azure, Microsoft 365 or Intune account, we get an Azure tenant. That is basically a instance, a machine that is dedicated to your account. And inside that, we also get a Microsoft Entra ID, which gets automatically created whenever we sign up to Azure. Now, as I told you, we have identity and users in this, right? And also, if you have worked with Azure, in Azure, we have got subscription, management groups, resource groups, which we discussed briefly in the previous video. And Microsoft Entra ID is the place from where we assign those users what they can access, right? So when we scroll further, we have Microsoft Entra ID in the middle because Entra ID is the place from where every authentication and authorization happens. And left side, you have application in it, you have users, you have devices, you have groups. And in the right, Microsoft Entra ID also helps you with a single sign-on with many other third-party application like Amazon, Google, Salesforce can be your personal application. Basically, you can use your Microsoft Azure account to log into these applications as well. And similar illustration you can see in this slide as well. We have Microsoft Entra ID as the middle. We can have the identities, and when I say identities, identities are basically your users in the Entra ID and that have a trust relationship with all this application and login. Now coming back to this slide, we have Entra ID versus traditional Active Directory. So earlier companies used Active Directory which ran on physical servers inside the office. Now with Entra ID, we do not have any servers to manage. Everything is in the cloud and users can log in from anywhere. we had one server and we had installed the Active Directory solution from where all the identities and their access to the companies were being managed. But with the cloud native, we have got Microsoft Entra ID, and Microsoft renamed the service to Entra ID. Before it was Azure Active Directory. And in this, basically, we do not have any service to manage. We just go to that service. I'll show you in a bit, and then create users, manage applications, whatever you want to do directly in the portal, right? Many companies who have a large footprints of on-premises, they often use the mix of both. That is having an on-prem Active Directory solution, which is traditional Active Directory, and the Entra ID working together. And basically, they sync up within set period of time so that a user which got created in traditional Active Directory gets synced to the cloud native also. Now let's go to the Azure portal and see how it works. So for that, we'll go to Azure portal and search for Entra ID. We can also go from here as well, right? So this is our Microsoft Entra ID. We get an overview, and this shows our basic information like the tenant, the email account, then the users, and the group, applications, and devices. And to see more options, we can go to manage. So there's a lot we can do with the Entra ID, but we'll cover the basics because this is going to be a beginner video. So now let's go to users and then add a user. So whenever we add a user, so we get two options, which is create a new user, or we can bring another external user in this organization as well. In this video, we'll go with create a new user, and we can give a name demo user, right? Basically, the user will have to use demo user at the rate this particular name to log in, and we can also add a display name, which is going to be a demo user, and the password I can keep the default, right? And then I'll leave that as next properties. So now in the properties, we can add more details to the user, like their first name, last name, what is going to be their job title, the company name, employee ID, the manager, and all of that options. I'll skip everything. Next assignments. So this is a part where I was discussing with authentication and authorization. So when I create the user, it will cover only the authentication part, and the assignment is the permissions we'll assign to the user so that when the user logs in, whatever job role the user has, he or she can start working on that with the enough permissions, right? So this is authorization, and I can add a role and give that user access. In this case, I'll just give a global reader just for demo, and next review and create. Right now, what will happen is when this user is created, when I send the credentials to that user, the user can log in directly to my account and start working, right? So this is how we create a user, and these users can access my account. Now next we have is a create group. Instead of giving access to users one by one, we can use groups, which simplifies the authorization part, giving access. Because if we assign users access one by one to the individual users, it can become hectic and also very difficult to centrally manage. But in the groups, what we can do is create a new group. Like suppose I want to create a group with the name of database DBA group admin, right? And I can give the description like to manage databases, and then I can give who is going to be the owner of this group. Let's go give to Aarya, and then the members I can add demo user which I just created. Now suppose if I've got multiple DBAs who are going to manage my databases, right? I can add multiple ones directly like this demo user, right? Now let's go to create. So now you can see the group is created. Now the part where I want to assign access centrally to this group, all the users who are part of this group will automatically inherit that access. To show that, let's go to Azure role assignments. And now if I want all these users to access databases, what I'll do is I'll go to the subscription, right? In this case, my subscription is Cloud Demos, and then I'll go to IAM, and then I'll go to add role assignment, which is the authorization part, giving access to a users or a group or an application, right? In this case, we are giving access to a group, and suppose my databases are in the virtual machines. I'll go to virtual machine contributor and then next and select members. In this case, let's suppose I'll search for DB admin group and then select next and review and assign, right? So this is how we create a group, assign access authorization to the group. And next is security features, which is very important in the sense that most cloud attacks happen because of stolen passwords. That's why Entra ID security features are very important to understand, especially for people who are going to manage the Entra ID of their organization. So important thing is to enable MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, and whenever they are logging in the username and password, there is additional layer of security that will prompt you to give the code to access. Now to see that, we can go to users, right, demo user, and then there's an option of authentication methods, and in authentication method we can add for that user additional layer of security. We can add email, and we can just give the email address here and then add, and with that whenever the user signs up they will get to enter the 6-digit code on their email as well. Right now, for the additional layer of security from the hacker or scammer, we can use to prevent from unauthorized access, and that is conditional access. So conditional access works in a sense that we can set up some parameters, and when those criteria are met, then only the user can access. For example, we can set up the criteria like the user can access the Azure account only when they are accessing it from their country. So suppose I've set up the country being India, and whenever a user goes to another country they will not be able to access. So that works in a sense that basically a hacker who has got credentials and is residing in another country, they will not be able to access because we have set up the criteria only from this location Azure account access for that user will work, right? Or if there's a risky sign in, directly block access of that user. These are all the concepts we can do, right? And this is what makes Entra ID powerful, that is we can access based on conditions. Now the real world use case, let's understand how companies use this. So a startup organization can use cloud only users, that is just Microsoft Entra ID will be used to log into Microsoft 365, Azure or Intune, right? Or an enterprise organization which has on-premises presence also, they can have a solution like an on-premises Active Directory and a Microsoft Entra ID working together in sync, so that each identity, user groups, applications which create in either gets replicated in other, right? So if you're starting with Entra ID, follow this path: users and groups, roles and permissions, multi-factor authentication and conditional access, identity protection. You can also go with the very basic, which is SC900, which is Microsoft Certified Security Compliance Identity Fundamental Certification. This is a very basic certification you can go for, which tests you on very beginner understanding on the Azure, right? And often Microsoft runs sessions or webinar. If you attend, you can get a free links to give the certification without any cost, right? So this was just a tip of the iceberg of Microsoft Entra ID, and Entra ID has a lot of the features we can go with and test it out. This was just to get the zest of how Entra ID works, right? Each user has got their own object ID, their principal from where Entra ID manages that access of the users. We can check their assigned roles, whatever they have access to, or any application they have created, the group memberships the user has, right? All these details we can access it from here. And there's a lot of other features we have in Microsoft Entra ID, which we'll cover later on the next videos. So if you're learning Azure, don't skip identity, because every Azure service depends on Entra ID. If this video helped you, like the video and subscribe Cloud with Aarya.